Australian businesses are currently setting $1.7 million on fire every single year.
Every single year.
Yeah, and they are doing it by buying software they think is actually supposed to save them money.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I am your host, Lex, representing C9 Podcast Show.
And I am Vera. We have an incredibly crucial topic to unpack today, and I'm just thrilled to be diving into this with all of you.
Before we get into the weeds, I want to specifically welcome the dedicated followers of the C9 Podcast and our business page.
Absolutely.
And most importantly, a massive welcome to our primary audience today. We're talking to you, the Australian business owners and C-level executives. If you hear something in this discussion that makes you pause or, rethink your technology strategy, do not forget to click that follow button and share this deep dive with your colleagues.
It is definitely a conversation every executive team needs to be having right now. We are looking at a massive aggregation of industry research today, and we're going to settle what is, arguably the biggest data decision dilemma facing Australian enterprises. Right. The mission today is pretty simple. We are going to determine which strategy actually delivers a better return on investment. Is it the generic, off-the-shelf business intelligence tools, or is it custom SQL dashboards?
It's a debate happening in boardrooms across the country. Usually it's sparked by a CEO or CFO looking at a severely blown IT budget and wondering, where all the money went.
Which brings us back to that staggering $1.7 million statistic I mentioned at the top.
Right, the wasted money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a lot of executives listening right now, buying an off-the-shelf generic BI tool, it feels like the safe choice. I mean, it's marketed as the cost-effective plug-and-play solution.
Yeah, that sounds great on paper.
You buy the software license, you connect it to your servers, and boom, you suddenly have this data-driven enterprise.
But when you actually look at the financial realities, when you look past the slick marketing brochures, that assumption completely falls apart. The initial licensing fee you pay for a generic BI tool is, it's really just a cover charge to get into a very expensive club. When we look at the data from the Australian Information Industry Association, there is a brutal financial ratio at play here. It's the 1 to 2.4U ratio.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does that ratio actually look like on a company's balance sheet?
It means that for every single dollar an Australian organization spends on a generic BI software license, they end up spending an additional $2.40 on the back end.
Wow.
Yeah, that extra money gets bled out through painful implementations, forced training, ongoing maintenance, and just desperate attempts at customization.
It is essentially like buying a massive, expensive Swiss Army knife for your business when all your operations team actually needs is a highly precise scalpel.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
And then to make matters worse, you have to pay for 42 hours of annual training per employee just so your team does not accidentally cut themselves on all the unnecessary attachments they never even asked for.
That is exactly what happens. You are paying a massive premium for a one-size-fits-all approach that, by its very definition, just cannot fit anyone perfectly.
Right.
When you calculate the 3-year total cost of ownership, the TCO, for a mid-sized Australian company using these generic tools, it rapidly inflates to somewhere between $350,000 and $780,000.
That is a huge jump from the initial license fee.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
And a huge portion of that budget is incinerated right at the beginning. I mean, 67% of generic BI implementations run over a budget by an average of 42%. And they drag out timelines by almost 4 months.
I want to ground this in reality because there's a case study here about a Sydney manufacturing executive, Sarah Thompson, that is just, it's painful to read.
Oh, the Sarah Thompson case.
She went into her board and got approval for a $180,000 budget for a generic BI implementation. She actually thought she was being conservative.
Which is a reasonable budget on the surface.
Exactly. But by the time she factored in the external consultants trying to force the software to work, the messy integration overhauls, and putting her floor managers on that endless training treadmill you mentioned, she had bled over $310,000.
And what was the ultimate result on the factory floor after all that?
That is the absolute kicker. After all that time and money, she still did not have the specific insights she needed to run her manufacturing lines efficiently.
That is a textbook example of feature bloat destroying value. The research indicates that the average Australian business utilizes less than 23% of the available functionality in these generic platforms.
Under a quarter of what they're paying for.
Exactly. If you are an executive listening right now, think about that. You are funding the research and development for hundreds of features that are utterly irrelevant to your daily operations. Take the prominent Australian retailer mentioned in the data.
Oh, the one with the 42 locations.
Yes, they had 42 locations nationwide and invested $230,000 into a leading generic BI platform.
Which, on the surface sounds like a logical modernization step for a retail chain of that size.
You would definitely think that.
Eh.
But within 6 months, the entire project collapsed. They discovered the generic platform could not effectively integrate with their specific, highly customized inventory management system.
Because it's too generic.
Right. They needed real-time stock tracking across those 42 locations to manage supply chain logistics. But the generic tool simply could not handle the complex custom hooks of their legacy system without just astronomical ongoing customization fees.
So what do they do? Did they just keep paying the fees?
No, after 6 months of struggling with incomplete data and terrible user adoption, they abandoned the platform entirely. They were left with a $230,000 piece of shelfware.
Ouch. So you overpay for the software, you pay external consultants to force it to work, and you pay to train your staff to use it. But the real financial damage hasn't even started yet.
Not at all.
What happens when that expensive generic dashboard actually gives you the wrong answer? Or gives it to you way too late?
That is when we cross over from an IT budget problem into a severe operational crisis. Generic BI tools are built to sell to the widest possible market: banks, hospitals, construction sites, and retail stores.
They have to cast a wide net.
Exactly. Because they have to appeal to everyone, their reporting templates are inherently generalized. We call this industry-blind reporting.
There is a perfect example of this in the research with James Wilson. He's a healthcare administrator down in Melbourne.
Right. I remember his case.
Yeah, he implemented one of these generic tools, and he admitted that it produced incredibly beautiful, slick charts. But healthcare is not a standard sales funnel. It completely missed the nonlinear patient journey visualizations that his clinicians actually needed to improve care pathways.
Which is the whole point of having the software in a hospital.
Right. He said they were looking at their critical data through an entirely distorted lens.
Which highlights a vital lesson here. Beautiful charts are completely useless if they do not map to the physical reality of your specific industry. And this leads to a much larger systemic issue. We see a persistent data silo paradox.
A paradox? How so?
Well, research from the University of Technology, Sydney found that 64% of Australian organizations report persistent data silos, even after they implement an enterprise-wide BI solution.
Wait, aren't enterprise BI tools literally sold on the promise of eliminating data silos? How are 64% of businesses still dealing with them?
What's fascinating here is the technical reality of how these tools are built. It comes down to something called the abstraction layer.
The extraction layer. Okay, explain that for us.
Because a generic BI tool acts as a middleman, it has to be able to connect the thousands of different potential databases across the world. To do that, they use a generic abstraction layer. They lack the deeply embedded, specific hooks required to pull complex, nuanced data from your unique legacy systems.
Okay, so to use an analogy, it is basically like hiring a really bad United Nations translator. You have a highly specialized legacy database speaking a very nuanced, complex dialect.
Yes, exactly.
The generic translator doesn't actually understand the nuances, so when it is asked to translate that data into a dashboard, it panics, guesses, or just completely leaves critical information out.
Spot on. When the generic tool forcefully translates that data, it creates massive reporting blind spots. Data gets mangled. And the moment your employees look at a dashboard and see that it is missing critical daily metrics, it actively destroys their trust in the system.
They just stop using it.
Yeah, they immediately abandon the expensive software and go right back to manually updating their siloed Excel spreadsheets.
And there is a massive performance penalty for having that clunky translator in the middle of your operations, too. The data shows that 58% of mid-market companies report huge system slowdowns once their data volume exceeds 500 gigabytes.
That's a huge drop in speed.
Yeah, dashboard loading times jump from 3.2 seconds to over 12 seconds.
Now, to someone outside of software development, 12 seconds might not sound like much. But in workflow terms, it is a disaster. It completely breaks a user's train of thought.
Oh, absolutely.
It discourages natural data exploration. I mean, if every single time an analyst clicks a filter or changes a date range, they have to stare at a loading screen for 12 seconds, they will stop asking complex questions.
I know executives who will abandon a checkout page if it takes 3 seconds to load. I cannot imagine forcing a team to wait 12 seconds for every single query.
It's just unworkable.
And when you cannot ask complex questions quickly, you get severe reporting lag. The aggregated research states it takes an average of 6.2 weeks for Australian companies to get answers to new business questions from these generic systems.
Over 6 weeks. That's terrifying.
6.2 weeks. If market conditions change, say there is a supply chain shock or a sudden shift in consumer behavior, and it takes your team a month and a half to configure a new dashboard just to understand what is happening, you are reading ancient history.
Which brings us to one of the most sobering statistics in the research. The $1.2 million failure.
Let's talk about that.
A leading Australian manufacturing firm invested $420,000 in a popular generic BI platform, intending to optimize their production efficiency. But because of that generic abstraction layer we discussed, the dashboards failed to capture the highly customized production line metrics unique to their factory floor.
So the tool essentially created a massive operational blind spot.
Precisely. Because the executive team trusted the beautiful but fundamentally flawed dashboards, they completely missed underlying mechanical inefficiencies. Those undetected bottlenecks ended up costing them $1.2 million annually.
That is just brutal.
The visualization tool that was supposed to save them money literally destroyed value.
Okay, we have thoroughly painted the grim picture of the generic BI mirage. It is expensive, it is slow, and it can actively blind you. Let's pivot to the solution. We need to explore the mechanics of why custom SQL dashboards completely flip this script.
It all comes down to precision and direct access. Custom SQL dashboards answer 87% of critical business questions directly. Compare that to just 53% for generic tools.
That's a huge gap.
Yeah. When you use Custom SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language, you are building the dashboard from the ground up to ask the exact questions your specific business needs answered without any compromise.
And because it connects straight to your database, you completely eliminate that bad UN translator. There is no abstraction layer mangling the data.
Exactly.
The research shows this direct integration yields a 340% improvement in query performance. You click, you get the accurate answer instantly.
Furthermore, consider vocabulary alignment. A generic tool forces your team to learn its generic Silicon Valley terminology. A custom SQL dashboard uses your company's actual internal language.
Which just makes so much more sense for the staff.
It really does. Michael Chen, a financial services CIO in Brisbane, demonstrated this beautifully. He built custom risk data visualizations designed to perfectly match how his credit committee already evaluated opportunities. By aligning the software's vocabulary and visual layout with their actual human workflow, he reduced their decision-making time by 64%.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the exact difference between buying an off-the-rack suit versus a bespoke tailored suit.
I like that comparison.
Yeah, an off-the-rack suit seems cheaper today, but you are going to spend years paying a tailor to constantly adjust the hems, take in the waist, and honestly, it will never quite fit your exact frame.
Right, it's always just a bit off.
Exactly. But a bespoke suit, a custom SQL dashboard might cost a little bit more on day one, but you put it on and you wear it perfectly every single day. It moves exactly how your business moves.
And having software that perfectly fits your business acts as a massive productivity multiplier. The data reveals that employees using generic tools spend an average of 7.2 hours a week simply exporting data out of the BI tool into spreadsheets just so they can manipulate it to do their actual work.
Almost a whole workday every week.
Just exporting data. Custom solutions eliminate that entirely. For a 50-person team of knowledge workers, saving those 7.2 hours a week translates to an estimated $400,000 saved annually.
That easily pays for the custom dashboard right there. But let's look at the ultimate metric, the one that truly defines competitive advantage: time to insight.
Yes, this is crucial.
Custom dashboards drop the time it takes to go from asking a complex business question to making a data-informed decision from 7.8 days down to just 2.3 days. David Nguyen, a retail executive in Perth, pointed out the reality of this. When you can answer questions 3 times faster than your competitors, you are already executing your strategic response while they are still just gathering and analyzing the raw data.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, especially for Australian businesses, we have to look at our unique regulatory environment.
Oh, absolutely.
The compliance requirements from bodies like APRA, ASIC, and the ATO are incredibly stringent and specific. Generic tools require immense manual manipulation by your finance schemes to meet these local reporting standards.
Because they're built for an American or European market standard, usually.
Exactly. But the data shows that custom SQL dashboards yield a 62% reduction in compliance reporting effort alone. For an enterprise in financial services or healthcare, that singular efficiency can completely justify the entire custom ROI.
We actually have the financial proof of that in the research. A mid-sized Sydney financial services firm made the bold decision to rip out their generic platform.
A very bold move.
Yeah, they built custom SQL dashboards focused entirely on their specific customer profitability and product penetration metrics. Did they pay 22% more upfront for the custom build? Yes. But look at the long-term mechanics. They achieved a 312% ROI in just 18 months.
Wow, over 300%.
Yeah. Their report generation was 76% faster. And because they finally had crystal clear visibility into their clients' exact needs, they saw a 23% jump in cross-selling success and a 9.2% drop in customer churn.
Which exposes the absolute truth about total cost of ownership. Over a 3 to 5 year horizon, custom SQL, which typically runs between $369,000 and $590,000, often matches or even beats the TCO of generic BI.
Because generic BI TCO keeps growing.
Right, it inevitably balloons from $351,000 to $825,000. With custom, you own the asset. You aren't paying endless subscription escalations per user. You aren't paying forced training fees on features you never use. And you aren't hostage to external consultants every time you need a new data hook build.
Okay, so if you are an operations director or a CEO listening to this, the numbers are undeniably compelling. But we have to answer the practical question. How do Australian executives actually implement custom SQL dashboards without completely derailing their day-to-day operations?
You definitely can't just stop everything.
Right. You simply cannot pause a functioning enterprise for 6 months to build custom software.
You absolutely cannot, which is why the research strongly advocates for a phased approach. This is not a chaotic rip-and-replace overnight strategy.
Nobody wants that.
A successful roadmap always starts with the discovery and foundation phase, typically taking 4 to 6 wins. This is where you gather business requirements, assess the reality of your data sources, and design the architecture without touching the live environment.
Just laying the groundwork.
Yes. Then you move into core dashboard development for 6 to 12 weeks. You build the foundational dashboards that answer your highest value questions first, rolling them out logically.
The timelines are actually very reasonable for mid-market players. Retail implementations usually take 3 to 5 months.
Right.
Healthcare, which obviously has vastly more complex privacy constraints and intricate legacy system requirements, takes 6 to 9 months.
Furthermore, you do not have to be an absolute purist about it. Emma Williams, a tech director in Adelaide, highlighted the strategic power of hybrid solutions.
Mixing the two approaches.
Exactly. She uses custom SQL for her company's core operational metrics, the unique, specialized processes that actually generate revenue for her business. But she kept a lightweight, inexpensive generic tool for standard HR and finance reporting, where the processes are universally identical across all companies.
That is brilliant resource allocation. You spend the money where it creates a competitive advantage, but there is also a sustainability imperative we need to address.
Which is?
The highest long-term returns do not just come from the software itself. They come from empowering the people using it. The data explicitly shows that comprehensive knowledge transfer to internal staff yields a 43% higher long-term ROI.
That makes total sense.
You need your development partner to upskill your internal tech team on SQL query optimization and dashboard modification. That way, you are entirely self-sufficient, not permanently tethered to an external agency.
Which naturally leads into the critical concept of data governance. You can build the fastest, most beautiful custom dashboard in the world, but if the underlying data rules are chaotic, the tool is useless.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. Strong data governance means establishing clear ownership, heavily documented definitions, and strict access controls. When an organization implements this, it leads to 37% higher user adoption and a 29% greater trust in the generated insights across the entire company.
So what does this all mean for you, the executive listening right now, who needs to make a decision on their 2024 or 2025 tech budget?
This raises an important question about the very soul of your operations. An organization's intelligence is ultimately only as good as its data governance. The absolute highest ROI comes from businesses that take fierce ownership of their data definitions and their business rules.
Right.
You simply cannot outsource your corporate brain to a generic vendor's template. Custom SQL forces you to truly understand your own data, and that deep understanding becomes an unassailable strategic asset.
And it completely future-proofs your enterprise. When you own your custom SQL architecture, you can integrate artificial intelligence and machine learning that is specifically tailored to Australian conditions.
Which is a massive advantage. You're not relying on a global generic AI model built in California. You can build demand forecasting based on local seasonal patterns. Like the fact that our big retail pushes happen during a blistering summer, completely unlike the Northern Hemisphere.
Such an important distinction.
And crucially, a custom build ensures strict granular compliance with the Australian Privacy Act and data sovereignty laws, guaranteeing your data stays safely onshore.
It allows you to adapt instantly. When local regulations change or a disruptive new competitor enters the market, your internal team or your dedicated partner can simply write a new SQL query to analyze the threat. You do not have to wait for a Silicon Valley vendor to hopefully add your request to their global feature roadmap next year.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a scenario to seriously ponder as you sit down to review your technology stack. Think about that time to insight metric we discussed.
The 7.8 versus 2.3 days. Exactly. If your biggest competitor in the Australian market has partnered with a custom developer and is now utilizing custom SQL dashboards to make strategic data-informed decisions in 2.3 days, and your executive team is still wrestling with generic dashboards, exporting data to Excel, and arguing over spreadsheet errors for 7.8 days, how many lucrative market opportunities are you already too late for?
In a volatile, highly competitive landscape, a 5-day delay on a critical decision isn't just a minor administrative inefficiency. It is the literal difference between capturing a new market segment and losing it entirely to a faster competitor.
Exactly. If you are tired of paying the hidden, exorbitant costs of the generic BI mirage, if you are tired of holding that clunky, complicated Swiss Army knife and wondering why it is costing your business $1.7 million in wasted potential, it is time to stop compromising. It is time to transform your data into a true strategic advantage.
The evidence across the board strongly favors precision, speed, performance, and total alignment with your specific business needs.
To achieve that level of precision, you need the right technical partner. We highly encourage you to partner with C9. They are Australia's leading custom software, apps, integration, and database developer company.
They really are the experts in this space.
They specialize in completely replacing those frustrating, slow, generic systems with high-performance, custom SQL dashboards engineered specifically for your unique workflows.
Take the next logical step for your business and stop settling for generic, delayed insights.
Head over to their website right now. Visit www.c9.com.au to schedule a complimentary assessment with their data specialists. That is www.c9.com.au. We want to thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the data decision dilemma. Please remember to hit that follow button, share this deep dive on your business pages, and send it to any executive who needs to hear this reality check. Until next time, keep your data precise and your decisions fast.